Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Transfer Talk Tuesday. Today's session, we will be talking about creating opportunities for Ohio's adult students. I'm going to start off with some introductions of myself and our panelists. My name is Abby Cohen, and I am the Assistant Director of Initiative Development and Processing here at ODHE. And I will turn it over to Lisa. Lisa, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Abby. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Holstrom, and I'm the Senior Associate Director for one-year option and pathways coming from our Ohio Technical Centers.
And Holly?
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Holly Hall. I'm the Associate Director for ITAGS, our industry recognized credential transfer initiative, and I'm happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you. And Jared?
Jared Schenk, Senior Director for Military and Apprenticeship Initiatives and Special Projects. Happy to be here as well.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. A quick overview of our agenda today. We will be talking about credit for prior learning benefits for students and institutions, credit guarantees provided by the Ohio Department of Higher Education and the Ohio Articulation and Transfer Network, and finally, working together to support adult students. I'm now going to hand over our presentation to Lisa. Lisa, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Abby. So we wanted to start off with some data about credit for prior learning. Kale has done some research in these areas and has found that some institutions are reluctant to award credit for prior learning. They believe it hurts their revenue, hurts enrollment, and so they really don't advertise this very much. So if you're in one of those institutions, I have some good news because there is some really strong research coming out that shows that adults who earn credit for prior learning are actually 17% more likely to graduate than adults that have not been awarded credit for prior learning. At community colleges, it's 25% more likely to graduate than students who don't have that CPL. Students of color benefit, 24% for Hispanic students, 13% more likely to graduate for Black students. And Pell students are 19% more likely to graduate if they've been awarded credit for prior learning. So the evidence is very clear that long-term, these students will stay, they will persist, and they will get to the graduation stage, which is very important not only to your success, but to the success and the goals of these students. So Kale has also done some additional research that shows that when a prospective student is aware that there are opportunities for credit for prior learning, it strongly influences their decision about where to attend college. So it is important that that message be upfront when working with adults and adult learners, the opportunities to receive credit for prior learning or be evaluated for credit for prior learning. And then, and this is a little counterintuitive, but once enrolled, students actually take an average of 17 more credits than when compared to students who have never received credit for prior learning. So they're making up a lot of what was given away for free by taking more courses. So there are enrollment opportunities. And so the data really shows that credit for prior learning benefits students, but it also really benefits the student and the institutions. And obviously the goal would be that more students get to the associate degree or bachelor degree graduation stage. So we're going to lead in then to talking about our statewide guarantees. And first up is Jared with military credit.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, to give you an overview of MTAG's not going to go into tons of details about the other initiatives, but just so you are aware, um, we try to treat the military as much as we can like its own institution in the state of Ohio. So just like all of your institutions have coordinators who work with your faculty to submit your coursework for the Ohio Transfer 36, the CTAGs, the ITAGs, and the TAG courses, that's basically what I'm doing at the state level, is trying to submit military courses to those exact same faculty panels. So the MTAGs are basically piggybacking or attached onto the other statewide guarantees, and then a faculty panel basically will make that exact same decision they make for your institution. So we send them the information, and then they basically say, yes, this is a match, or no, it's not a match. If it becomes a match, that gets sent out to the institutions as a memo that says this is now a military transfer assurance guide. That would then carry the statewide transfer guarantee, just like it would if it was a new tag course or an OT36 course or the other guarantees. And basically that means, sort of knock on wood, that should be automatically awarded when they come to your institution. When those memos go out and that information is sent out to the schools, hopefully somebody is encoding that in your systems, and then when that student comes to you, that credit should automatically be posted for them. Basically, what that means is their credit should not have to be reevaluated in any way by another group of faculty members. There's also what we call non-MTAG credit, and frankly, this is really bigger and more vast than the MTAG credit, just because of the way the guarantees work and the way the military credit is a pretty large group of courses. I just kind of call this the all other military credit category. Basically, anything that's not an MTAG, it is really still the responsibility of the schools to do that evaluation work. I'll talk about that later in the presentation today, but basically we want to see you follow the same process that you would follow for your regular transfer coursework. And the same process really that I'm doing at the state level is we want you to submit that military coursework that doesn't have an equivalency, send that out to the appropriate faculty panels or the appropriate department on your campus and get that stuff evaluated. So that's what we're talking about with military. I will hand it back off to Holly now.
Thanks, Jared. So just to give you, a little briefer on what ITAGs are. So as I said, our industry recognized credential transfer assurance guide. So based off of some of our existing transfer credit guarantees, kind of use a similar process. But what these are statewide. And so in this case, it means all of our public colleges and universities, and they would apply at those that have a relevant program or course in that field. So that is one important distinction between a credential that we consider an ITAG that has been approved, or other credentials that maybe at your individual institution you give credit for, but we haven't yet approved it for statewide, or haven't reviewed it. So a lot of institutions have their own lists of approved credentials, and that's awesome. So what we do, like our other initiatives, we guarantee course specific credit, or sometimes it's program specific if it's a very large credential that takes a longer time to achieve. And so from there, we base that on the fact that ITAGs recognize the knowledge, skills, and competencies that are gained through credential attainment. Usually some sort of assessment or standardized exam is involved in that process. So whether that's a national exam or maybe a state developed exam for a state licensure field. But it doesn't matter where the student learned that material, where they learned the knowledge and developed those skills. If they've proven that they have them through passing that exam and attaining that credential, that's what truly matters. And so we can kind of line that up and say they would have the same outcomes as a student who completed a comparable course. And kind of like what Jared mentioned with the MTAGs is ITAGs might sometimes overlap with some of our other transfer initiatives. And what this does is it expands the credit guarantees to new populations. So it's not duplicating or anything like that. It really opens up the door to a new audience. So it really helps build on all of the course equivalencies we've already built. So for example, in computer aided design, We had existing course equivalencies in that area. And when the ITAG was developed for that, it just took that credential, several credentials associated in that area, and said, yes, if someone holds one of these credentials, they are also eligible for credit for this course, just the same as a student who took it at this community college or this university, or who took the course through a high school career technical program, passed their end of course exam. So we might use the same course, but just open it up to new audiences. So this opens it up to someone who maybe through their workplace or just individual training on their own, or any other means, earned that credential and got trained. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what an ITAG is and how it fits into some of our other our other transfer initiatives. And because they are industry credential focused, it is, heavily oriented towards adult learners. So they can support other populations. They can tie into our work with the secondary audience as well. But they are definitely really targeted as an on-ramp for Ohio's adult learners to enter or re-enter higher education.
And then I'll talk a little bit about pathways for students coming out of our Ohio Technical Centers. So in 2014, the Ohio General Assembly actually passed some legislation that guarantees graduates of OTC programs that are 900 clock hours or more, and that have one chancellor approved industry recognized credential, that they'll receive 30 college technical credit hours towards a technical degree at an Ohio public institution. So when this was originally adopted back in 2014, 15, 16, teams got together and really articulated the credit coming out of OTCs with an Associate of Technical Studies. An ATS is usually a customizable degree that has room for 30 technical credit hours. And then students, they receive this block of credit. And then there's additional technical courses, and there's some required general education in order to fulfill the requirements for this Associate of Technical Studies. We're in the process of a rebrand of this. We noticed that a lot of the credentials that have been embedded in the original pathways were out of date. We don't think anyone teaches Microsoft 8 anymore. So we're looking at updating the credentials that are involved, updating the pathway for Associate of Technical Studies, but also then looking at, especially when we think about what ITAGs are doing for students, if they're completing ITAGs or credentials that are eligible for ITAG credit at OTCs, what does this do? How does this open up an Associate of Applied Science or an Associate of Applied Business pathway for a student? So not just letting students know that they would be eligible for an ATS, but also looking at making sure that they understand all of their options. Adults, we all know, need lots of options. So making sure that they're also aware that there is an Associate of Applied Science and an Associate of or an Associate of Applied Business available, and really creating pipelines to a lot of your programs that are already have courses that are equated to the ITAGs embedded in them, and students would then become aware of them and talk to your admissions representatives about the credit for prior learning that they might receive. So I think, Holly, we're going to talk about putting opportunities into practice.
Yes. So we don't want these to be the best kept secrets in the state. So while a lot of our focus here at ODHE and within the Articulation and Transfer Network is developing these agreements and making sure they're communicated to our educational partner audiences, and that we have that information in our technology and in our databases where it's needed. But we want to make sure they get used and they actually prospective students or students know about them, and that our kind of on the ground practitioners know what they need to know about them to tell students. So this is where you all definitely come in, and we try our best to support that. So whether that's if we need to provide more information in an area, or we love bringing together, kind of communities of practice to discuss and share what's working well at one college, or if we hear about someone struggling with something, we might, have an idea based on, getting exposure to this larger population of institutions who have, different challenges implementing these guarantees. So we have a few areas we just wanted to touch on where they're really important. So outreach is a huge piece for adult learners. We don't just have that one single pipeline coming from high school. We have people coming from all sorts of different places. And they're not, being targeted with the higher education message as much, and they might not be aware of these kind of more unique opportunities to get college credit. So outreach, which then, goes into identification of these students. So if they're coming to you, being able to identify that they might be eligible for credit because they might not know. And it could help with yield efforts, help with financial savings, and then also just how to verify the credit. So with some of these, it can be a little tricky. There's a lot to know. There's a lot of different areas. So we'll provide some advice on that. And just kind of bringing this all together. So we have a few different initiatives we've talked about, but these don't live in silos. And you can easily have a student who has all of these backgrounds within one person. So, really making sure people have an understanding of how these initiatives work together. So next, I'm gonna dive into outreach a little bit. So I have a few examples I'll show you just to kind of get creativity flowing and get you thinking of ways that at your institution you can try to provide some outreach to adult learners on these opportunities that they have. So, using different visual tools and really putting a lot of information out on your websites for them that they don't have to dig for, or, try to contact someone to get at least that basic information that they need. In addition to that, partnerships with employers are really key here, because that's where we have those populations of students, and faculty really come into play there because they can really, keep them within their own industry and focus on developing partnerships for upskilling students and not necessarily shifting them out. So, really using that work experience they have and building upon that rather than starting fresh. And that can really benefit, your institution as well as those employers. And it can be a system where, learners kind of ebb and flow in between the two systems. It's a great opportunity, to develop scholarships or, tuition reimbursement on the employer end. So that's just a really key area. If you think about what your strong programs are, who your big employers are that you work with. Of course, as Lisa mentioned, with our work with the Ohio Technical Centers, really building relationships and establishing more specialized agreements with between those partnerships between a local college or university and their nearby technical centers. All of our state guarantees are kind of like a baseline in a sense usually. So if you have an area where you might award additional credit on top of our guarantee, or be able to provide, wraparound services to that specific population with your partner institution or technical center. That's great to really build on top of those. And again, with websites, really, tailoring them to these audiences, so they know what they need to know. And you can kind of tie all of these different initiatives into one centralized place so that they're not all living separately. As I mentioned, someone could be from the military, but they could also have an industry credential. They could have attended a technical center. So, kind of finding a way to incorporate that all into a central location so someone knows about all of their opportunities. So next, I'll show you just a couple examples of some maps as visuals to help people understand what is the benefit of going into higher education or returning to higher education if they're already an adult, maybe especially if they're working and have a job, why should they return? And so, you might have audiences who are already considering that, but through different partnerships, you might reach people who really didn't have that on their mind at the time, but you can spark an interest. So we have a couple of resources available on our website. So on the area of our website for iTags, there is a kind of resources page where this is available as a blank template. It can be downloaded and used and filled in. And I also know of colleges who have used this and as an inspiration and developed their own kind of with more of their own unique branding, but kind of took this idea and rolled with it. So iTags are a little tricky to understand, right? It's a newer concept to a lot of people, and for each industry, they might end up with a couple things. So you're dealing with new audiences over and over again. So it's not like when you work with high school students and they've learned about AP exams and AP classes and they hear about them in different subjects. Each time we have a different subject or discipline for an iTag, it's kind of a whole new audience who's learning about it, whether that's from the potential student or the employer. So you really have to try to make it as easy to understand as you can, to kind of give them that initial hook. So this was just an example of showing how one of our iTag credentials, a Cisco Certified Network Associate, how it would give you credit at Stark State. They filled out this example for us. And let me tell you, they did this really quickly. So a faculty member helped, threw some stuff in there really quick to give us an example. So it doesn't have to be something that takes a ton of your time. And maybe it's something you can improve upon as time goes on, but really just getting that initial information out there will be a huge step forward for your prospective adult learners. So what we do is show that credential is worth 9 credit hours at Stark State, and those apply toward both a certificate as well as an Associate of Applied Science. Kind of hitting the key highlights of how much time does this save you, what kind of career pathway does this move you into, and of course including the contact information for who they can connect with to learn more about this opportunity. And sometimes it seems simple, but honestly, a lot of the times it is hard to make that leap from. We are seeing more colleges post information about credentials that you can get credit for, but that connection of what major or what certificate or degree does that count toward is not always there. And so that requires an extra step on that potential student's part to try to track down more information. And, you can imagine if they're doing that at, considering multiple colleges at once, that's a lot. And we know our adult learners have busy lives and they're squeezing this in here and there. So really, it's beneficial for them and then your institution in return by, really simplifying that and shortening that process for them to track down that information they need. And then the next example we have is kind of more of a generic in the sense of this applies to the whole state, just kind of focus more on the career pathway that an iTag is associated with. So it's not about one particular school, but it uses that same credential. So we're still working with the Cisco Certified Network Associate here. And we see kind of along the bottom, you're building this stackable academic pathway, but showing what the associated career benefits are with that. So, we want to let people know what is the point of an iTag. And it's really as simple, you're getting college credit for this industry certification, and that can increase your earning potential or your job opportunities or both. So, it varies depending on the field and what level of college credential you pursue. But we show here someone, with that certification might be kind of working at more of an entry level wage as a computer support specialist. If they build on that though, and, at least earn their college certificate, this one's like more of a short-term certificate in this example, they are still in that same occupation, but they're earning justification for getting a higher level wage for doing that continuing education and gaining additional skills. And eventually leading into an associate degree where they're now eligible to move up into the next level of occupations in that field. So earning a much higher wage than they were at the start. And it shows, the time savings, the money savings, and also just the incremental nature of stacking, that it's not this super long-term goal that's kind of hard to conceive, but you can get there in steps and you can see returns along the way. And I think that's, those are important messages for adult learners. And this really just kind of helps show you what we're doing with an iTag is we're taking the certification and then stacking the college certificate or degree on top of that to help people upskill. So we're working to develop these across all of our iTags. So in case you're not familiar with what some of our iTags are, this was one example in our IT area. So we definitely have a lot in the information technology and cybersecurity area, many in engineering technology and manufacturing as well. Some in the healthcare field, public safety has been a big area lately, and in a whole variety of other areas. So definitely check out our website to see what those different opportunities are. So if you or a faculty in those areas, want to develop some new outreach to get learners into your programs, you can get some ideas there. Pass it off to Jared.
All right, thank you. I'm going to talk about ways to identify and verify credit. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier with the military. So for the military students, really, and frankly the other students as well, as soon as you can meet with them and ask them, some of their past experiences, where have they done some type of training, schooling, something, whatever they've done beyond high school, essentially, get that information out of them as soon as you can. I mean, it's really important to ask, simple questions. Have you served in the military? Have you earned any type of credential? Lisa talked about the 1-year option with the Ohio Technical Centers. Have you done courses at a technical center? So part of that with the military is, if they're saying yes to those, okay, well, have you sent in your military transcripts, your joint service transcript or your community college of the Air Force transcript? Those are both relatively easy to request, and many of our schools, for the joint service transcript, you can actually get the student to give you permission as an institution, and somebody probably in your admissions area has permission to actually go into the ACE system and download their military transcript. Like, you guys can get it as an institution almost instantaneously. Community College of the Air Force seems to still be taking a little bit longer. They do kind of what I'll call like a normal process. You go out to their webpage, you request a transcript and get it sent to the school. It's not instantaneous like the joint service transcript. A couple other things, going along with that, kind of military specific. As advisors or folks dealing with these students, I think it's important to look at those courses and see what might be eligible for credit. Looking at the joint service transcripts, the ACE recommendations for credit. I mean, if you just look at the military course title, that's really not going to tell you anything about that course and what was in it. So you really do need to look at the credit recommendations for it, and then send that information off to whoever's evaluating that credit on your campus, whether that be faculty or somebody in the registrar's office, and whatnot. And with the Community College of the Air Force, they're set up a little bit more similar to a normal institution. You can actually go download like their course catalog and send that information off to faculty members. Sometimes it's still not going to be enough, but it at least gets the ball rolling and lets them know that there might be a course that, they could be eligible for some usage in their degree program. It just depends. So really advocating that folks evaluate that credit. In the past, there was some concerns brought up about, what if we award a whole bunch of military credit? How's that impacting satisfactory academic progress? I think that question comes up with regular adult students as well sometimes, depending on their backgrounds and if they're switching majors and things of that nature. And with the military specifically, I can't say that I've heard that being a firm barrier anymore. I heard that years ago, but I've talked with numerous financial aid advisors and even went to their financial aid conference several years ago and brought up this question. And basically every single one of them said that there's ways for us to accommodate those students if they've hit the 150% rule, whether that be through some type of a waiver process, or some schools can automatically waive it via basically like a degree audit process that they do internally for satisfactory academic progress. So kind of depends on the institutions, but there is a way to alleviate that. For industry credentials, really that information's coming out like when the ITAG memo is released. It'll kind of specifically tell you how you can look up that credential and award that credit. So there's kind of direct guidelines right in that document. And then I think, as Lisa mentioned earlier, with the OTCs, as those programs get approved, that information is going to be disseminated out to all the institutions and posted on our webpage in that area as well. So you'll be able to see, what programs are eligible for credit from the OTCs. And then, checking all those resources. It's kind of the same thing as looking at those memos to see how you're awarding credit. You can go to the ITAG page and just basically ask the question, is this credential in ITAG? Ask that student, do you have any third-party credentials that you've earned? And if they say yes, some of those you're probably going to know instantly if it's in your particular area that you're advising students in. But if you don't know, you can go out to our ITAG page and ask, hey, is this an ITAG? That kind of makes it easier because it's already been evaluated. If it's not an ITAG, then I would probably say one of two things, or maybe two things total. I would say is it would still be worth sending us that information at ODHE, OATN, our group, to basically say, hey, we're starting to receive students with this particular credential. Maybe we should consider this as an ITAG. But then also you as an advisor out there on the campuses should really consider, whatever your method is for evaluating that, probably some type of prior learning assessment. I would consider, pushing that forward to say, can we align this to one of our courses that has that credential somehow built into it, or is used for, a program specific elective or something like that. It kind of depends on how that's structured. Questions, how many MTAGs can be awarded? There really isn't any limit on MTAGs. I mean, there's really not any limit on transfer credit per se, but you do have to have a certain number of hours from the actual institution earned. So you can only count so many hours of outside credit. I think for the baccalaureate programs, I think it's 90 hours, if I remember correctly, that you can transfer in. You do still have to have some type of residency requirement. But for most intents and purposes, there's really not going to be too many students that are maxing out on some of this PLA credit. And then, same question, if they say, hey, I completed this program at the Ohio Technical Center, go out to the webpage, ask, hey, was that approved? Is it a one-year option program? Even if it's not, I would still advocate, see if you can evaluate that credit for something. See, even if it's not a one-year option, is that something that you guys can still use as credit in a particular program? So don't just leave it off the table if it's not a one-year option. And likewise, if it is something that you're using and your faculty really like that program, maybe that's worth contacting Lisa and saying, hey, we started really loving this OTC program down the road, and we would be just wondering if this could potentially be looked at as a one-year option. I mean, anything that we can get from the field that gives us information to move forward is always a good thing. So I think that's it. I think I might turn it over for Abby. I think she might have a couple questions.
Yeah, so I wanted to open the floor for some questions for our panelists. And the first question is, can each of you give an example of a pathway that leverages the statewide guarantees that support adult learners? And I'll go ahead and start with Lisa.
So thanks, Abby. There are a lot of pathways that are coming out of the OTCs. And I just wanted to tag on to Jared's presentation, and a lot of you may not realize that an OTC student does get a transcript, and it will show how many clock hours they've spent around different topics. It will show the credentials that they've earned. And so sometimes that is a good way to verify and get ideas about how you can help that student and negotiate the prior learning assessment process. A good example probably of a pathway might be something in the information technology area. And I use that because we're looking at, how does this line up to an Ohio guaranteed transfer pathway? So these pathways don't have to stop at associate degrees. And if it's possible to align an associate of applied science in cybersecurity, for example, with a bachelor's of science in information technology, we want to be able to demonstrate that the student doesn't have to stop at an associate degree if their personal or professional career goals include a bachelor's degree. So there are opportunities to move forward, not just in IT, but that was kind of the first one I thought of, all the way to the bachelor graduation stage. And even though they're not ready right now, they may want that opportunity in the future, and we want to be sure that they're aware.
Thank you. Holly, if you could give a pathway.
Yeah, so actually I think for time, and since I kind of shared my map example, I'll pass off to Jared, but I will just mention, we do have a lot of industry credentials that are definitely earned through our military population. So ones in our public safety area, as so if you look at emergency medical technicians, for example. So I think that's one area to look at where they have that certification, but through their military training could be eligible for additional credit as well. So Jared, I'm not sure what your example was, but if you want to build on that.
I was just going to highlight, outside of what we've talked about in this presentation, virtually every initiative we have can impact the military in some way, shape, or form. And I'm just focusing in on that adult population because of my specialty. But, I'll just say based on like my own experience, for those of you who don't know, I'm a veteran. I did an AP course in high school, joined the Army, did my various Army training, got CLEP training, did a transfer course while I was in service, and then came out and started as basically a brand new, out of high school freshman, because everybody was always looking at me like, are you a transfer student? Are you a new student? Or what? They were asking that question all the time. But I just wanted to highlight that because it's almost rare anymore for a military student to just come to you with a few hours of military credit. Like it's going to be much more common for them to have this conglomeration of stuff that you have to kind of weed through and figure out how it gets posted, how it gets put on the transcript. And like I said, if you're really looking at the guaranteed transfer pathways that really try to incorporate all of the elements in there, you can start looking at, okay, where does this particular military training was an MTAG. Okay, that fits this. Okay, this student has AP credit. That fits, this requirement. Oh, they did a CLEP exam. That fits this requirement. And then likewise, if they happen to get out and go to an OTC to do some adult training, they might be eligible for, the 1 year option. Or, while they were in service or when they got out, they could have done something to receive an industry recognized credential. That's pretty common in the military, especially like in the IT fields. They want them to have all those credentials and be utilizing that. So there could be a whole slew of credentials that they might have. So it's really kind of goes back again, all the way back to the beginning when we said you really need to ask them questions about their life experience. You really do need to have that, 5-10 minute conversation at least of saying, tell me about yourself. What have you done? Where have you gone? What have you learned? And then try to maximize that. So I don't have like a, direct PDF of a pathway to show you on here, but basically every pathway option that we have, including like what Holly showed you, you can overlay military on top of that. You can overlay AP, you can overlay CLEP, you can overlay, anything that we're doing. Soon we're going to have International Baccalaureate, depending on when they went to high school or where they went to high school, that could be in there as well. And military dependents are often taking IB courses. So all of those things are going to be layered on to everything, and hopefully all of that in some way, shape, or form builds to like the guaranteed transfer pathways and really showing how you can get a degree and move forward.
Thank you. For time purposes, if one of you just wants to answer what other supports are considered best practices in the research on adult learners.
I'll take this one, Holly, or Abby, if you could go to the next slide. I've got some notes. So thank you. So there's been a lot of research on supporting adults to the finish line, and some good, resources. Certainly CALE, the organization called REUP. Lumina's done some research. So there are a lot of good organizations doing it, best practices on supporting adults. So a few of the things that we've been reading about that we wanted to kind of share with you is that, students shouldn't, especially adult students, they shouldn't have any cost surprises. So making sure that they understand their tuition fees, books, if they're living in a residence hall, all of those fees, making sure that they understand them up front. A lot of them are supporting families, and so even the slightest difference between what they think they're going to spend and what they actually have to spend can really upend a family's budget. Having helpful and accessible staff at the help desk, these students who do need help, whether it's the transfer center or the enrollment help desk, their time can be very limited. So getting immediate, helpful, and accessible help is really important. Having a financial aid staff that understands working adults. So that may be staffing a help desk and evening, weekend, online availability, understanding that these students aren't living with or supported by parents. The first question being, something about parents. It's like, I'm, 40 years old. My parents are no longer in the picture, but being able to talk to them without assuming that they're the 16, 17, 18-year-old that they're normally accustomed to dealing with. And then if you can, carving out some adult-friendly scholarships, that can mean, sorry, I've got a big sun, the sun's out. But having some scholarships that are available for part-time students, not just full-time students, may be a way to carve out some adult-friendly scholarships that aren't age-based. Programs that continually attract adults may offer specific scholarships and resources, but also having them aggregated on a website. So again, like Holly mentioned before, they're not trying to connect the dots across a bunch of different because you're divided into offices. The student appreciates having all that information aggregated into one website. So some other supports that the research bears out, certainly some access to childcare, dependable transportation. Flexible scheduling is a big one, whether it's online classes, they're doing an entire program online. Maybe they're just doing their general education classes online and coming to campus for their major classes, but some type of scheduling that allows them to honor their work responsibilities as well as their family responsibilities. Success coaching has been a popular model. A lot of these students are first generation students, even though they're older. And having someone that's kind of holistically looking at the picture rather than just their academic performance might be helpful to them. And then access to basic needs help and emergency funds. Sometimes they just need a little financial bump to get them maybe over some rent before their financial aid check is received. Usually those emergency funds don't need to give a lot of support, but when they do, they are the difference between that student stopping out and that student persisting. So having, and this is something that donors love to give to. So making sure that your development offices are aware that basic needs and emergency funds for working adults might be an avenue that maybe they haven't pursued. And there's a lot of organizations and alumni that would like to give to this kind of endeavor. So, and then I'll go ahead and wrap it up, Abby, if you want to go to the next slide. So we do have a web page or websites that are dedicated to adult learners on the highered.ohio.gov site. So you're welcome to check this out here. It also has links to a lot of our OATN adult focused initiatives. And finally, our contact information. So Abby, Holly, Jared, and myself, there's our contact information. And then when all else fails, we have a transfer box. So feel free to hit the transfer box and you'll be able to get directed to someone who can help you answer your question.
All right, thank you, Lisa, and thank you all for joining us this Tuesday afternoon for another Transfer Talk Tuesday. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you again for attending.